If the homeless woman wins the lottery, the billionaire will discover she's his mother. Before we start, tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? And stay until the end to rate this incredible story from 0 to 10. Alexander Sterling had everything money could buy. At 35, he was the youngest self-made billionaire in tech, living in a penthouse that overlooked Manhattan like a throne above the clouds. But standing in his pristine office, watching the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt nothing but contempt for what he saw below. "They're all the same," he muttered to his assistant James, a silver-haired man who had been with him since the beginning. "Lazy, always looking for handouts instead of working for it like I did." James cleared his throat carefully. "Sir, the production team is ready for your approval on the reality show concept." Alexander turned, his sharp gray eyes glinting. "Ah, yes, Second Chance Street. Let's see if any of them actually deserve help, or if they're just professional victims." The concept was simple, almost cruel in its elegance. 10 homeless people would compete in a televised reality show for $10 million. Challenges would test their character, resourcefulness, and determination. America would watch. Alexander would judge. Alexanders, and maybe, just maybe, one of them would prove they deserved a way out. "I pulled myself up from nothing," Alexander said, straightening his $1,000 tie. "If they have what it takes, they'll show it. If not, well, at least we'll expose the truth about handout culture." What Alexander never told anyone, what he barely admitted to himself, was that nothing meant a foster care system that had chewed him up and spit him out. 20 families in 18 years, each one taking the checks but never really seeing him. He had no idea who his real parents were. The file just said, abandoned at 3 months old, mother unknown. So he stopped caring. He worked. He clawed. He built an empire on code and cold logic, and now he would prove that anyone who stayed at the bottom chose to be there. The cameras loved him. Cold, calculating, brutally honest. The villain America loved to hate. 3 months later, the show premiered. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation as Alexander walked onto the stage, his tailored suit catching the lights perfectly. "Good evening," he began, his voice smooth as silk and twice as expensive. "Tonight, we begin an experiment. 10 people, $10 million, one winner. We're going to find out if poverty is a circumstance or a choice." The audience reaction was mixed. Some applauded, others shifted uncomfortably. "Let me introduce our contestants." One by one, they appeared on screen. Marcus, 45, veteran with PTSD. Sarah, 28, recovering addict. Tommy, 19, aged out of foster care. Each had a story. Each had the hunger in their eyes that Alexander recognized but no longer felt. Then came contestant number 7. And this is Elena Rodriguez, 60 years old, homeless for 15 years. The camera showed a woman with weathered brown skin, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun despite her circumstances. She wore donated clothes that were clean but worn, and her hands trembled slightly as she waved to the crowd. But her eyes were different. They held something Alexander couldn't name, something that made his chest tighten inexplicably. Elena stood on that stage, and her gaze found Alexander's. For just a moment, her composure cracked. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. The cameras caught it. The audience gasped. "You all right there, Elena?" Alexander asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Not getting emotional already, are we? We haven't even started." Elena straightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "I'm fine," she said, her voice thick, with an accent that spoke of Puerto Rico and pride. "Just grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Sterling." "Grateful," Alexander repeated, turning to the audience with a smirk. Let's see if gratitude translates to action. What Alexander didn't see was Elena whispering to herself as she walked off stage. "Mi hijo, my baby boy," after all these years. The first challenge was brutal by design. Each contestant received $100 and 24 hours. Their task, turn it into as much money as possible. Through legal means. No begging. just pure entrepreneurial spirit. Alexander watched from the control room, surrounded by monitors showing every contestant. Marcus bought supplies and offered to wash cars, made $200. Sarah created artwork on the sidewalk with chalk, made $150. Tommy bought candy wholesale and resold it, made $300. Then there was Elena. The cameras followed her to a dollar store where she bought ingredients: flour, sugar, eggs, cinnamon. She found a community center that let her use their kitchen, and she started baking. "What's she doing?" Alexander muttered, leaning forward. James, ever present, adjusted his glasses. "Appears to be making pastels and tembleque, sir. Traditional Puerto Rican desserts." Elena worked through the night, her weathered hands moving with muscle memory. She hummed while she worked, old songs in Spanish that the cameras caught softly. When dawn broke, she had dozens of beautiful pastries, but she didn't sell them. Instead, she went to a children's hospital. The cameras followed, confused. Alexander's frown deepened. "What is she doing?" he demanded. "She's supposed to be making money." Elena walked through the hospital corridors until she found the pediatric cancer ward. She spoke to the head nurse, gesturing to her pastries. The nurse's expression softened, and she nodded. For the next 6 hours, Elena gave away every single pastry to sick children and their exhausted parents. She sat with a little girl who had no hair, holding her hand and singing softly in Spanish. She made a boy laugh for the first time in days with terrible jokes. She hugged mothers who looked like they'd forgotten what kindness felt like. In the control room, Alexander's jaw clenched. She's eliminated. She made $0. She failed the challenge completely. "Sir," one of the producers interrupted nervously, "you might want to see this." The camera had caught what happened next. As Elena prepared to leave, the hospital administrator approached her. The conversation was captured clearly. "Ma'am, what you did today. Our families needed that more than you know." "It was nothing," Elena said softly. "I know what it's like to lose everything. But those babies, they still have so much life to fight for." "We'd like to hire you," the administrator said, "part-time, helping in our family resource center. We can't pay much, but—" "How much?" Elena asked. $500 a week. Elena's eyes widened. She did the math quickly. "That's $2,000 a month. That's more than I've seen in years. When can you start?" "Right now." In the control room, Alexander stood frozen. She turned $100 into a job that will pay her $24,000 a year. That's a 24,000% return on investment. "Actually, sir," James said quietly, "it's infinite return. Because what she really invested wasn't money, it was compassion." Alexander waved him off. "It's still against the spirit of the challenge." But when they showed the footage to the studio audience for elimination voting, something unexpected happened. The crowd stood and applauded. They chanted Elena's name. Social media exploded. Elena for the win trended worldwide. Alexander had no choice but to keep her in the competition. But his resentment grew like a cancer. "This week," Alexander announced, "each contestant will receive something more valuable than money: power. You'll each be given authority over a city department for 1 day. Let's see what you do with it." Elena was assigned to the Department of Social Services. Alexander personally chose it, a cruel irony he found amusing. "Let's see the homeless woman try to navigate bureaucracy," he told the producers. What happened next became the most watched episode in reality TV history. Elena arrived at the Department of Social Services office at dawn. She wore the same donated clothes, but she'd somehow made them look dignified. The actual workers were skeptical, some openly hostile. "Great," one clerk muttered loud enough for cameras to catch. "A homeless woman is going to tell us how to do our jobs." Elena smiled sadly. "I'm not here to tell you anything. I'm here to understand why the system I needed so badly failed me so completely." She spent the first hour just listening, walking through offices, reading files, sitting with caseworkers who were drowning in paperwork. She didn't judge. She didn't criticize. She just absorbed. Then she called a meeting with every staff member. "I see you're overwhelmed," she began. "Too many cases, not enough time. You want to help, but the system is broken. So today, we're going to do something different." She restructured everything. Instead of caseworkers handling cases individually, she created teams. Instead of making clients come to multiple offices, she organized mobile units to go to them. Instead of requiring 15 forms, she streamlined it to 3. "But the regulations," someone protested. "The regulations say we must serve the people," Elena interrupted gently. "They don't say we must torture them with paperwork first. We can follow the rules and still show heart." By midday, they'd processed more cases than they usually handled in a week. By evening, the waiting room was empty for the first time in years. The staff was laughing, energized, remembering why they'd chosen this work. One case worker, a young woman named Jennifer, approached Elena with tears in her eyes. "My own grandmother is homeless. I've been trying to help her through the system for months. Today, with your changes, I finally got her approved for housing. In one day, you did what I couldn't do in 6 months." Elena hugged her. "The system isn't evil, Mija. It's just forgotten who it serves." In his penthouse, Alexander watched the footage with something dark twisting in his chest. The cameras had caught Elena's face when she read through the social services files. Her expression when she saw families separated, children in the system, mothers searching for kids taken away. She'd whispered to herself, not realizing the mic caught it. 40 years. 40 years I've looked. 40 years the system told me nothing." "What's she talking about?" Alexander asked James. James had done his research. He always did. According to her background check, "Sir, Elena had a son taken from her when she was 20. She's been searching for him ever since. The system lost the records. She never found him?" Alexander felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. That's horrible." "Yes, sir, it is." For the first time in 20 years, Alexander couldn't sleep that night. The third week brought the cruelest challenge yet. Each contestant had to choose: accept $50,000 right now and leave the competition, or continue competing for the $10 million. But knowing that only one person could win. 5 contestants took the money and left. They had immediate needs, and $50,000 was life-changing enough. Elena stood before Alexander in the challenge room, the check for $50,000 on the table between them. "You could take this," Alexander said, his voice softer than usual, which somehow made it more cutting. "You're 60 years old. You've been on the streets for 15 years. $50,000 would set you up. You could get an apartment, start over. But if you stay, you might get nothing. So what's it going to be, Elena? Are you greedy enough to gamble it all?" Elena looked at the check for a long moment. Her hands trembled. Then she looked up at Alexander with those eyes that somehow saw through everything. "May I ask you something, Mr. Sterling?" "Sure," he said, leaning back with a smirk. "When you built your first company, when you had nothing and it was just an idea, did anyone offer you an easier path?" Alexander's smirk faded. "No." "And if they had, would you have taken it?" Silence. "I didn't think so," Elena said gently. "You believed in your vision enough to risk everything. Well, I believe in something, too. I believe I'm here for a reason. I believe someone needs to win this money who will use it to help others, not just themselves. I believe that person might be me. So no, Mr. Sterling, I don't want your $50,000. I want to finish what I started." She turned and walked away, leaving Alexander staring at the unclaimed check. James appeared at his elbow. "That woman has more courage than most CEOs I've known." "She's foolish," Alexander said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Perhaps? Or perhaps she understands something about value that you've forgotten." By week 4, only 4 contestants remained: Elena, Marcus the veteran, Sarah the recovering addict, and Tommy the foster kid. The challenge was simple: tell your story, completely, honestly, on camera. Nothing held back. Marcus went first, describing the horrors of war and the system that failed him when he came home. The audience wept. Sarah told of addiction born from trauma, of losing her children, of fighting every day to stay clean. The audience stood and applauded her courage. Tommy spoke of 18 years in foster care, of abuse and neglect, of aging out at 18 with nothing and no one. The audience donated money on the spot. Then it was Elena's turn. She walked onto the stage slowly, her weathered hands clasped in front of her. Alexander watched from the judges' panel, his expression carefully neutral, but something in his chest was pounding. "My name is Elena Maria Rodriguez," she began, her voice steady despite the tears already forming. "I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I came to New York when I was 19, full of dreams and faith and foolish hope." She paused, gathering strength. "I met a man. He was charming, handsome, made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. I got pregnant. I was so happy. I thought we'd be a family." Her voice cracked. "He left when I was 4 months pregnant. Just disappeared. No note, no goodbye. I tried to find him, but he'd lied about everything. Even his name." Alexander's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "My baby boy was born on December 3rd, 3 months premature, so tiny, so perfect. I named him Alejandro, after my father. Alexander in English. I held him for 3 days before they said I had to leave the hospital." The studio was dead silent. "I had no money, no job, no family here. I tried everything. I begged for work, slept in shelters, carried my baby in a donated carrier, but it wasn't enough. I couldn't feed him properly, couldn't keep him warm, couldn't—" She broke down sobbing. The audience sobbed with her. When she could speak again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Social services took him when he was 3 months old. They said it was temporary, just until I got stable. They said I could visit, could work to get him back. I believed them." Alexander's face had gone pale. "But the system, it swallowed him up, swallowed us both. They moved him to different homes. I tried to follow, tried to stay close, but I couldn't keep up. I lost jobs because I kept trying to see him, lost housing because I spent money on bus fare to his foster homes instead of rent. Each time I fell further behind, it got harder to prove I could be his mother again." She looked directly at the camera, directly at Alexander, though she couldn't see him through the lights. "When he was 2 years old, they terminated my parental rights, said I was unstable, said he deserved better. They sealed the records. I've been searching for 40 years, 40 years of asking every agency, every shelter, every church, 40 years of looking at every brown-eyed boy and wondering, is that him? Is that my Alejandro?" The audience was openly weeping now. "I fell apart after that. Depression, they called it. PTSD. I couldn't hold jobs, couldn't hold on to housing. The world became too big, and I became too small. I've been on the streets for 15 years. And every single day, I wonder if he's okay, if he's happy, if he hates me for giving up." She wiped her tears with shaking hands. "But I never gave up. Not really. 3 months ago, I was in a shelter, and someone had left a business magazine. On the cover was a young CEO, some tech genius. The article said he'd pulled himself up from nothing, from the foster care system, had no family, no roots, just himself and his determination." Alexander's heart stopped, and I looked at his picture, and I saw his birthday listed, December 3rd, 35 years ago, and I saw his eyes brown like mine, and his chin strong like my father's, and the way he held his head, proud but lonely, and I knew. A mother knows. She looked directly at the camera, tears streaming down her face. "So I came on this show, not for the money, not even really for the chance to win. I came because I needed to see him, too. My Alejandro. My Alexander. I needed to know he was okay, that he'd survived, that he'd become strong, even though I couldn't be there to help him." The studio erupted, not in applause, but in gasps and shouts and chaos. Alexander stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "No," he said, his voice shaking. "No, this is a lie. This is a scam. You researched me, you found my birthday, you're trying to manipulate—" But Elena was already walking toward him, and the cameras caught everything. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a plastic bag, yellowed with age. Inside was a hospital bracelet, a birth certificate, and a photograph. "They let me keep these," she whispered, holding them out to him with trembling hands. "One picture, 3 days old, in my arms, before they took you away." Alexander stared at the photograph, at the tiny brown baby, at the exhausted but radiant young woman holding him, at the hospital bracelet that read, "Baby Boy Rodriguez." December 3rd, 7:42 a.m., his birthday, his exact birth time. "This proves nothing," he said, but his voice was breaking. "DNA. We need DNA." "I agree," Elena said softly. "I want you to be sure. I want you to know the truth, whatever it is." They brought in a DNA testing company that night. The cameras rolled as they swabbed Elena's cheek and Alexander's. The whole thing felt surreal, like a fever dream. Alexander retreated to his penthouse afterward, James following silently. "It's impossible," Alexander said, pacing like a caged animal. "The odds are astronomical. She's lying. She has to be lying." "Sir," James said carefully, "what if she's not?" "Then what?" Alexander exploded. "Then what, James? Then everything I believed, everything I built myself on, it was all because she abandoned me, because she was too weak to keep me, because I wasn't worth fighting for." "Or," James said quietly, "because the system failed you both. Because she was a victim too. Because she's been searching for you for 40 years while you've been hating people like her." Alexander sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to be someone's son. I don't know how to forgive 40 years of nothing. Perhaps," James suggested, "you could start by hearing the whole story." The DNA results took 3 days, 3 days that felt like 3 years. The show went on hiatus, but the world watched and waited. Social media exploded with theories, arguments, hopes, and fears. On the 3rd day they gathered in the studio. Elena, Alexander, the remaining contestants, the production crew, and a live audience. The envelope with the results sat on a table between them. A genetic counselor stood beside it, a neutral professional whose job was to explain the science. "The results are conclusive," she began. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were kind. "Based on the DNA samples collected, there is a 99.97% probability that Elena Rodriguez is the biological mother of Alexander Sterling." The world stopped. Elena's hands flew to her face, sobs shaking her entire body. "Mi hijo, mi hijo, mi hijo." Alexander stood frozen, every wall he'd ever built crumbling like sand. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" The counselor continued. "Additionally, we found something interesting in the genetic markers. Mr. Sterling, you have a genetic predisposition for—" But Alexander wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at Elena, really seeing her for the first time, seeing past the weathered skin and gray hair and donated clothes, seeing the woman who had held him for 3 days, the woman who had spent 40 years searching, the woman who had sacrificed everything, even her dignity on this show, just for a chance to see him again. "You really looked for me?" His voice was small, broken. "For 40 years?" Elena nodded, unable to speak. "But why?" The question came out like a sob. "Why keep looking? Why not just move on, have another family? Forget about the baby they took away?" Elena finally found her voice, raw and fierce. "Because you were mine. Because you were loved. Because every single day you were gone, a piece of my heart was missing. You think a mother can just forget, can just move on? You were 3 months old, Alejandro. 3 months I held you, fed you, sang to you. 3 months I promised you I would protect you. And then they took you, and I spent 40 years trying to keep that promise, trying to find you, trying to make sure you were okay." She stepped toward him, and he didn't back away. "I know you've been angry," she whispered. "I know you think I abandoned you, but I didn't, mi amor. I didn't. I fought for you with everything I had, and when that wasn't enough, I kept fighting anyway. Every day, every single day." Alexander's carefully constructed facade shattered. Tears he hadn't cried in 30 years poured down his face. I thought nobody wanted me. I thought I was thrown away. No, Elena said firmly, taking his face in her weathered hands like she had every right to, like she'd been waiting 40 years for this exact moment. You were wanted. You were loved. You are loved. You have always, always been loved. And then Alexander Sterling, billionaire CEO, collapsed into his mother's arms and cried like the 3-month-old baby who had been taken from her. And Elena held him, rocking him gently, murmuring in Spanish the lullabies she'd sung 40 years ago. The cameras captured everything. The world watched a mother and son reunite after 4 decades of searching, and there wasn't a dry eye anywhere. The show was over, obviously. Nobody cared about the competition anymore, but the aftermath was just beginning. Alexander took Elena to his penthouse that night. She stood in the living room that was bigger than any place she'd lived in decades, looking lost and overwhelmed. "I don't belong here," she said softly. "Then I don't either," Alexander said, "because you're my mother, and wherever you belong, that's where I belong too." They stayed up all night talking. She told him everything: the abusive shelters, the jobs she couldn't keep, the mental health system that failed her, the constant searching, the hope that kept her going even when she wanted to die. He told her everything too: the foster homes, the abuse, the loneliness, the anger that fueled his success, the emptiness that no amount of money could fill. "I was so cruel to you on the show," he said, shame coloring his voice. "I judged you. I mocked you. I thought you were just another person looking for a handout." "You didn't know," Elena said simply. "And even if I wasn't your mother, even if I was just another homeless woman, would that have made it right?" The question hung in the air. "No," Alexander admitted quietly. "No, it wouldn't have." Over the next weeks and months, everything changed. Alexander hired the best doctors to address Elena's health issues, the PTSD and depression that had gone untreated for decades. He didn't put her in therapy and forget about her. He went to family sessions with her, learning about generational trauma and systemic poverty and how the system had failed them both. Elena didn't move into his penthouse permanently. "I need to do this right," she said. "I need to heal, to become whole again, before I can truly be your mother." So Alexander bought her a beautiful apartment in a building with a community garden. He hired a therapist to visit her 3 times a week. He made sure she had everything she needed, but more importantly, he showed up. Every Sunday they had dinner, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes with her cooking the Puerto Rican dishes she'd made in that first challenge. But the real transformation was in Alexander himself. He went back to the Department of Social Services with Elena. He met with the caseworkers, the administrators, the people on the front lines. He listened to their stories of trying to help with insufficient resources. He saw the files of children in the system, mothers searching for babies, families torn apart by poverty. And he did something his board of directors thought was insane. He pledged $1 billion to reform the child welfare system. "I can't give those years back," he told the press conference. Elena standing beside him. "I can't undo what happened to us, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to others. I can make sure that when a mother is struggling, we help her keep her baby instead of taking him away. I can make sure that children in foster care have advocates who actually care. I can make sure the system serves the people instead of destroying them." The money funded emergency housing for struggling parents, mental health services, legal advocates for families in crisis, a complete overhaul of the caseworker system, training programs for foster parents, and a searchable database to help separated families reconnect. Elena became the spokesperson for the initiative. The woman who had been homeless on national television was now on Capitol Hill, testifying before Congress about the failures of the system. "My son and I lost 40 years together," she told the assembled politicians. 40 years we can never get back, but we have today, we have tomorrow. We have a chance to make sure other mothers and children don't lose their 40 years. That's worth fighting for." The bill passed. The Elena Rodriguez Family Preservation Act became law. 6 months later, they brought everyone back for a special reunion episode. All the contestants, the crew, the audience who had been there for the DNA revelation. Alexander walked onto the stage, but he was different now. Softer somehow. More human. Elena walked beside him, holding his hand. 6 months ago, Alexander began, I stood on this stage and thought I understood the world. I thought poverty was a choice. I thought people on the streets were there because they weren't trying hard enough. I thought I had pulled myself up from nothing through sheer will, and anyone who didn't do the same was weak. He paused, looking at Elena. I was wrong about everything. Yes, I worked hard. Yes, I succeeded. But I also got lucky. I happened to have foster parents, however terrible, instead of aging out onto the streets. I happened to be good at coding, a marketable skill. I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right idea. And I happened to be angry enough to fuel myself forward instead of self-destructing. He turned to the remaining contestants. Marcus, your PTSD isn't a weakness. It's a wound from serving this country, and we failed you. Sarah, your addiction wasn't a choice. It was survival, and we failed to help you heal. Tommy, you aging out of foster care with nothing wasn't your failure. It was ours. His voice grew stronger. And Elena, my mother, spent 40 years searching for me, while society told her she was worthless. While people like the man I used to be judged her for being on the streets without knowing how she got there, without caring why she stayed. He pulled out a series of envelopes. We're not doing the $10 million prize. Instead, we're doing something better. Every single person who participated in this show is receiving $1 million, no strings attached. Marcus, Sarah, Tommy, everyone. Plus full access to support services, housing, therapy, job training, whatever you need. The audience erupted, but Alexander wasn't done. And the remaining $9 million? It's going to a foundation that will help people in exactly the situations you all faced. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation for Second Chances. Elena was crying, but they were good tears now. Healing tears. Tommy, the 18-year-old foster kid, stood up. Mr. Sterling, can I say something? Of course. Tommy walked to the stage, his hands shaking. 6 months ago, I thought you were the worst person I'd ever met. You were everything I hated. Rich, cold, judgmental. You looked at us like we were garbage. Alexander nodded, accepting the truth of it. But you changed. You actually changed, and that gives me hope. Because if someone like you, someone who had every reason to be angry and bitter and cold, if you can learn to be compassionate, then maybe I can too. Maybe I can take my pain and turn it into something good instead of something that destroys me. He turned to Elena. And you, ma'am, you never gave up. 40 years, and you never stopped looking. That's the kind of love I've never known, the kind of love I didn't think existed. Thank you for showing me it does. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Elena's apartment had become a home. The walls were covered in photographs. Baby Alexander, teenage Alexander, adult Alexander, and new pictures of them together. The kitchen always smelled like something wonderful, and the living room was constantly full of people. Every Sunday, Alexander came for dinner, but he didn't come alone anymore. James came, the assistant who had become Alexander's closest friend and now ran the foundation. Marcus came, the veteran who now headed the PTSD support program. Sarah came with her children, whom she'd regained custody of after getting clean and stable. Tommy came, now in college studying social work. They'd become a family. Not through blood, though blood had brought them together, but through shared pain, shared healing, and the conscious choice to love each other. Elena stood at her stove, stirring a pot of arroz con gandules, and watched them all in her living room. Alexander was on the floor playing with Sarah's kids. Marcus and James were debating politics. Tommy was showing Elena's neighbor how to apply for college scholarships. Mihijo, she called out, come taste this. Tell me if it needs more sofrito. Alexander got up from the floor, laughing as one of the kids tried to climb on his back. He came into the kitchen and dutifully tasted the rice. "It's perfect, Mommy," he said, and kissed her cheek. "Mommy." It had taken him 3 months to say it the first time. Now it came naturally. "You look happy," Elena observed, studying his face like she still couldn't quite believe he was real. "I am happy," Alexander said, surprising himself with the truth of it. "I spent 35 years building an empire and feeling empty. Now I spend my time building a foundation and feel full. Funny how that works." "Not funny," Elena corrected gently. "That's just love. Love fills us up in ways money never can." After dinner, as everyone was leaving, Tommy pulled Alexander aside. "Hey, so, there's this kid I met at the group home I volunteer at. He's about to age out, no family, nowhere to go. Smart kid, just needs a chance. You want me to meet him?" "Actually," Tommy said nervously, "I was thinking maybe I could foster him. I know I'm young, but I've been approved, and I just thought, he needs what we all needed, someone who gets it." Alexander felt his throat tighten. Tommy, who had aged out of foster care with nothing, was now giving back. "That's beautiful, Tommy. How can I help?" "Just be his uncle, I guess," Tommy laughed. "Odd this family keeps growing." "Yeah," Alexander said, looking around at his mother's apartment, at this chaotic, wonderful, mismatched family they'd built from broken pieces. "Yeah, it does." The Elena Rodriguez Family Preservation Act had reunited over 3,000 families in its first 2 years. 3,000 children back with parents who had been fighting to keep them. 3,000 mothers and fathers who no longer had to search. Alexander and Elena were invited to the White House to receive a Presidential Medal of Freedom for their work. Elena wore a beautiful dress that Alexander had insisted on buying, though she'd protested it was too expensive. "Mommy," he'd said, "when the president gives you a medal, you don't wear donated clothes." "Why not?" she'd argued. "They're perfectly good clothes." They compromised. New dress, but she got to donate the amount it cost to the foundation. At the ceremony, the president spoke about them. These two individuals proved that family is stronger than circumstance, that love is more powerful than systems, and that it's never too late to fight for each other. Elena cried, of course. She still cried easily. Tears that James explained were part of healing, of letting out 40 years of grief. Alexander held her hand and cried too. He cried a lot more now. Turned out he'd been holding back decades of tears. After the ceremony, a woman approached them hesitantly. She was young, maybe 30, and she held a small boy's hand. "Ms. Rodriguez? Mr. Sterling? I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to thank you. Your foundation helped me keep my son. I was about to lose him, just like you lost each other, but your lawyers helped me fight. Your emergency housing program gave us a place to stay. Your mental health services helped me heal. And now we're together. We're okay." The little boy looked up at them with wide eyes. "Are you the lady who found her baby?" Elena knelt down to his level, ignoring the expensive dress. "Si, mi amor. I found him." "My mama found me too," the boy said seriously. "She never gave up, just like you." Elena hugged him, then his mother. Alexander watched with tears streaming down his face. This man who had once thought compassion was weakness. "How many more?" he whispered to James. "How many more what, sir?" "How many more families can we save? How much more can we do?" James smiled. "As many as it takes. As much as we can." Elena's 65th birthday was a celebration 5 years in the making. Alexander rented out an entire community center, the same one where Elena had baked those pastels for the first challenge. The room was packed, not with celebrities or billionaires, but with families. Families the foundation had helped reunite. Caseworkers who had been trained through their programs. Former contestants from the show who had become friends, advocates, family. There were speeches, of course. Marcus talked about how Elena had shown him that strength wasn't about hiding pain, but about healing from it. Sarah spoke about how Elena's example had taught her that past mistakes didn't define future worth. Tommy, now a licensed social worker with 2 foster sons of his own, thanked Elena for showing him what unconditional love looked like. But the real surprise came at the end. Alexander stood up, his hands shaking slightly as he held a microphone. "Mommy, can you come up here?" Elena, surrounded by children she'd been playing with, looked confused but came forward. The crowd quieted. "5 years ago," Alexander began, "I thought I knew everything. I thought I was self-made, self-sufficient, didn't need anyone. I looked at people struggling and thought they were weak. I looked at people on the streets and thought they deserved to be there." He turned to Elena, taking her hands. "Then I met a woman on a reality show I created to prove how superior I was. A woman who was everything I thought I despised. Homeless, poor, dependent on charity. I judged her. I mocked her. I thought she was just another person looking for a handout." The room was silent except for Elena's soft sniffles. But she wasn't looking for a handout. She was looking for her son, for me. She had spent 40 years, searching for the baby that had been stolen from her by a system designed to help but programmed to harm. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. "Mommy, you gave me life twice. Once when you brought me into this world, and once when you found me again and taught me how to actually live. You taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in smiles. That real power isn't control, but compassion. That real strength isn't independence, but the courage to love even when love has hurt you." He opened the box. Inside was a simple necklace with 2 pendants, a mother and child, intertwined. "This isn't much, considering everything you've given me, but I wanted you to have something that represents us. Separated for 40 years, but never really apart. Because you never stopped searching, never stopped loving, never stopped being my mother even when I didn't know you existed." Elena was sobbing now, and so was half the room. Alexander clasped the necklace around her neck, then pulled her into a tight embrace. "Te amo, Mommy. Thank you for never giving up on me." "Te amo, mihijo," Elena whispered back. "Always, forever, no matter what." The room erupted in applause, but Alexander wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling back but keeping his arm around Elena. "Mommy, you've been living in that apartment for 5 years. It's nice, it's comfortable, but it's not really yours, so I bought you something." He handed her an envelope. Elena opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a deed to a house. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, but a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood full of families, with a backyard and a garden and a porch for sitting. "It's in your name," Alexander said, "completely yours, no strings, no conditions. And it's big enough for Tommy's kids to visit, for Marcus to have his support group meetings, for Sarah's family to come for Sunday dinners, big enough for all the family we've collected along the way." Elena couldn't speak. She just held the deed and cried and nodded and hugged her son like she'd never let go again. Tommy's younger foster son, a shy 7-year-old named David, tugged on Elena's dress. "Miss Elena, does this mean you'll have room for baking? Because I really like your tembleque." Elena laughed through her tears and scooped him up. "Oh, mi amor, I'll have the biggest kitchen you've ever seen. You can help me bake whenever you want." "Can we make it a tradition?" David asked seriously. "Every Sunday we all come and you teach us to cook?" "That," Elena said, kissing his forehead, "is the best idea I've ever heard." 7 years after the reality show that changed everything, Netflix released a documentary about Alexander and Elena's story. It was directed by one of the producers from the original show, a woman named Rachel, who had been so moved by their journey that she'd dedicated years to telling it properly. The documentary included footage from the original show, interviews with everyone involved, and updates on all the families the foundation had helped. But the most powerful parts were the intimate moments. Elena teaching Alexander to cook Puerto Rican food, Alexander teaching Elena to use a smartphone to video chat, both of them in therapy sessions learning to heal together. One scene in particular went viral. It showed Elena and Alexander visiting the hospital where he'd been born 42 years after social services had taken him away. They stood in the maternity ward, looking through the window at the newborns. "You were so small," Elena whispered, her hand pressed against the glass. "So perfect. I counted your fingers and toes over and over, couldn't believe you were real." "What did you think about?" Alexander asked quietly. "When you held me?" "I thought about your future. I imagined you growing up strong and happy. I imagined teaching you to cook, to dance, to speak Spanish. I imagined you going to college, maybe becoming a doctor or a teacher. I imagined your wedding, your children." She smiled sadly. "I imagined being your mother through all of it." "You didn't imagine I'd become a billionaire?" Elena laughed. "No, mi amor. I imagined something better. I imagined you being loved." Alexander wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You know what I used to imagine? When I was a kid?" "What?" "I imagined that my real mother was out there somewhere, and she had a really good reason for giving me up. Not just that she didn't want me, but that she couldn't keep me. That maybe she was sick or poor, or trapped somehow. And I imagined that if she could, she'd come find me." Elena turned to look at him, tears flowing freely. "I was right," Alexander said simply. "You did have a good reason. And you did come find me. It just took 40 years. I'm sorry it took so long." "Don't be. We're together now. That's what matters." The documentary ended with footage from a foundation event. The camera panned across a room full of reunited families, children laughing, parents crying happy tears, caseworkers celebrating victories, and in the middle of it all, Elena and Alexander, dancing salsa badly, laughing at their own mistakes, completely and utterly happy. The final shot was Elena speaking directly to the camera. "People ask me if I'm angry about the 40 years we lost. I tell them no, I'm not angry, because those 40 years taught me something important. Love doesn't give up. Love doesn't stop searching. Love doesn't end just because the system says it should. My son and I lost 4 decades together, but we have the rest of our lives, and we're going to make every single day count." The screen faded to black, then text appeared. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation has reunited over 15,000 families since its inception. The foundation continues to fight for systemic change, advocate for struggling parents, and ensure that no mother has to search for 40 years to find her child. If you or someone you know needs help navigating the child welfare system, visit elenarodriguezfoundation.org, because every family deserves a second chance. Elena's house had become exactly what Alexander had hoped, the heart of their extended family. Every Sunday without fail, it filled with people: Marcus and his wife, Sarah, her husband, and their 3 kids, Tommy, his partner, and their 4 foster-to-adopt children, James and his girlfriend. A rotating cast of foundation staff, volunteers, families they'd helped, and random people who had somehow become part of their tribe. Elena, now 70, moved slower but with no less grace. Her hair was completely silver, but her eyes still sparkled with that same knowing wisdom. She spent her mornings in the garden, her afternoons cooking, and her evenings surrounded by the family she'd built from broken pieces. Alexander, now 45, had gray at his temples and laugh lines around his eyes. He'd stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his tech company to focus full-time on the foundation. Money kept coming in from his investments, but he barely noticed anymore. His wealth was measured differently now. On this particular Sunday, the house was more chaotic than usual. Tommy's oldest foster son, now 18, was graduating high school. The family was celebrating. "Speech!" someone shouted, and everyone took up the chant. "Speech! Speech!" The young man, Daniel, stood up nervously. He'd come to Tommy 5 years ago, angry and broken, convinced the world had nothing good to offer him. Now he was headed to college on a full scholarship to study law. "I don't really know what to say," Daniel began, his voice shaking slightly, "except that 5 years ago I thought family was something you were born into, something you either had or didn't, and I didn't." He looked around the room at all the faces watching him with love and pride. But then Tommy took me in, and he brought me here, to Miss Elena's house. And I realized family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who stays. It's about who fights for you, even when you're not worth fighting for. You were always worth fighting for, Tommy interjected, his voice thick with emotion. Daniel smiled. That's what family does, I guess. They see worth in you before you see it in yourself. Miss Elena, Mr. Sterling, you two lost 40 years together. But you turned that loss into something that saved people like me. You created a foundation that kept hundreds of kids with their parents who were fighting to keep them. You created programs that helped kids like me, who aged out alone, find families anyway. He pulled a small photo from his pocket, holding it up. It showed Elena and Alexander from the reality show before the DNA test, when he still treated her with contempt, and she still looked at him with hope. I keep this picture in my wallet, Daniel said, to remind myself that people can change, that the worst moment doesn't have to define us, that love can survive anything, even 40 years apart, even systems designed to destroy it. He turned specifically to Elena. Miss Elena, you taught me that searching for someone is a form of love. My biological mom, she didn't search. She just let me go. But you searched for 40 years. And even though I'm not your biological son, you made me understand what it means when someone refuses to give up on you. Elena was crying, which surprised no one. She stood and hugged Daniel tightly, whispering something in Spanish that the others couldn't hear. Then Alexander stood, cleared his throat. Since we're doing speeches, I have something to say, too. The room quieted, sensing something important. 10 years ago, I created a reality show designed to prove that poor people were poor because they were lazy, that people on the streets were there because they didn't try hard enough, that I was better than them because I had pulled myself up from nothing. He paused, looking at Elena with infinite tenderness. I was cruel, I was wrong, and I was miserable, though I didn't know it. I had billions of dollars and nothing that mattered. Then a homeless woman entered my competition, and she turned my entire world upside down. Elena smiled through her tears. Mommy, you didn't just find me. You saved me. You taught me that real wealth isn't money, it's connection. Real power isn't control, it's compassion. Real success isn't climbing over others. It's lifting them up with you. He looked around the room at the family they'd gathered. Every person in this room represents a choice. Marcus, you could have stayed angry at the system that failed you. Instead, you help other veterans navigate it. Sarah, you could have stayed trapped in addiction. Instead, you help other mothers recover. Tommy, you could have decided the system broke you too badly to help others. Instead, you're giving kids the family you never had. Daniel, you could have stayed angry at the world. Instead, you're going to law school to change it. His voice grew stronger. And Mommy, you could have stayed bitter about 40 lost years. You could have hated me for the way I treated you on that show. You could have taken your $1 million and disappeared. Instead, you chose love. Every single day for 10 years, you've chosen love over bitterness, forgiveness over resentment, hope over despair. Alexander pulled out another envelope, and Elena groaned. Not another house, Alejandro. One is enough. Everyone laughed. Not a house, Alexander said. Something better, or at least, I hope it's better. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, several pages long. What is this? Elena asked. It's everything I wish I could have told you during those 40 years we lost. Everything I would have said if I'd known you were searching, every birthday wish, every Mother's Day, every Christmas, every ordinary day. I wrote them all down. 40 years of letters to the mother I didn't know I had but always needed. Elena's hand shook as she held the pages. She started reading the first one. Dear Mommy, today I turned 1 year old. I don't remember this birthday, but my foster mother at the time wrote in my file that I cried all day. Maybe I was crying for you. Maybe somehow I knew you were out there, searching. She couldn't continue. She pulled Alexander into a fierce hug, and they stood there, mother and son, while their chosen family surrounded them with love. Read them later, Alexander whispered, when it's just us. There are some things a son needs to say to his mother, even if it took 40 years to figure out what they were. The Foundation's 15-year anniversary gala was held at the Museum of Natural History. 1,500 people attended, including senators, celebrities, advocates, and most importantly, hundreds of families the Foundation had helped reunite. Elena, now 75, moved with a cane but refused to slow down. She wore a stunning, deep purple gown that Alexander had commissioned specifically for the evening, and she looked regal. Alexander, 50 years old with more gray than brown in his hair now, stood at the podium to speak. 15 years ago, he began, my mother and I were reunited after 40 years apart. We'd lost 4 decades to a system that failed us both. A system that took a baby from a struggling mother instead of helping her. A system that moved that baby through 20 foster homes instead of investing in keeping families together. The room was silent, attentive. We started this foundation with one goal. Make sure no other family loses 40 years. And I'm proud to say we've succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Images appeared on the screens behind him. Families hugging, children laughing, mothers crying happy tears, fathers holding babies they'd fought to keep. In 15 years, we've reunited over 50,000 families, 50,000 children back with parents who love them, 50,000 parents who didn't have to search for decades, 50,000 stories that ended differently than ours. Applause erupted, but Alexander raised his hand. But more importantly, we've prevented another 200,000 families from being separated in the first place. 200,000 times when a struggling parent got emergency housing instead of losing their kid. 200,000 times when mental health care was offered instead of judgment. 200,000 times when the system chose to preserve families instead of destroying them. The applause grew louder. None of this would have been possible without the woman who taught me what love really means. Mommy, can you come up here? Elena made her way to the stage slowly, and Alexander took her arm, supporting her. When she reached the microphone, she looked out at the sea of faces and smiled. I'm not good at speeches like my son, she said, her accent still thick after 55 years in America. But I know how to tell the truth. And the truth is this: the system didn't fail us because it was evil. It failed us because it forgot the most important thing. She paused for effect. It forgot that families are worth fighting for. That mothers who struggle aren't bad mothers, they're struggling mothers. That babies taken from their parents lose more than homes. They lose their identities, their cultures, their roots. That 40 years is a long time to search, but it's nothing compared to the lifetime of knowing you gave up. Tears streamed down many faces in the audience. My son, Elena continued, placing her hand over Alexander's on the podium. He lost 40 years of having a mother. I lost 40 years of watching him grow. But we found each other, and instead of staying angry, instead of staying broken, we decided to turn our pain into purpose. She looked directly at the cameras, knowing this would be broadcast. If you're watching this and you're searching for someone, don't give up. Keep looking, keep hoping, keep loving. Because love doesn't end just because someone is gone. Love keeps searching until it finds what it lost. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Elena's 80th birthday was a quiet affair by her request. Just family, she said. But just family now meant over 50 people crammed into her house. She sat in her favorite chair on the porch, a blanket over her lap, despite the warm summer evening. Alexander sat beside her, and they watched as their extended family filled the yard. Tommy's kids, now adults, played with their own children. Marcus's grandchildren ran around with Sarah's grandchildren. Daniel, now a successful lawyer working for the foundation, stood with his wife and newborn daughter. James, retired now, argued politics with a group of younger staff members who had grown up through the foundation's programs. We did good, didn't we, mijo? Elena said softly. We did better than good. Mommy, we changed the world. Elena laughed, that same warm laugh that had first caught Alexander's attention on the reality show 20 years ago. We didn't change the world. We just loved people better than the system did. That's not changing the world. That's just being human. Maybe being human is enough. Maybe, Elena agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Alejandro, I need to tell you something. Her tone made him nervous. What is it? I'm tired. We can end the party, Mommy. Just say the word. No, not tired like that. Tired like I've lived a good life. Longer than I ever expected after those years on the streets. I've seen my son become an amazing man. I've been surrounded by family I chose and who chose me. I've helped change a system that broke us both. I'm not afraid anymore. Alexander felt his heart clench. Mommy, are you... I'm not dying tomorrow, don't be dramatic, Elena chided, but gently. But I'm 80 years old. I won't live forever. And I need you to know, you gave me everything I ever wanted. These last 20 years with you, they made up for the 40 I lost. They made up for everything. Tears ran down Alexander's face. I'm not ready. Nobody ever is, but you'll be okay. You have family now, real family. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get hard. They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the sunset over their chosen family. Tommy approached the porch with little David, now in his 20s, with a child of his own. Miss Elena, David's daughter, wants to meet her great-grandma. Elena's eyes lit up. I have a great-grandchild? You have 12, Tommy said, gesturing to all the children in the yard, maybe not by blood, but by choice. And we've all agreed, our children should know their great-grandmother's story, should know that family is something you build, not just something you're born into. Elena held the baby, cooing in Spanish, and Alexander watched his mother, 75 pounds soaking wet, weathered by years of hardship, but radiant with love, and thought about the homeless woman who had entered his reality show 20 years ago. That woman had saved his life. She'd taught him that success without compassion is just emptiness with a better view. That wealth without generosity is just loneliness in a bigger house. That all the money in the world can't buy what she'd given him, a family. Elena Rodriguez lived to be 83 years old. She died peacefully in her sleep, in the house Alexander had bought her, surrounded by photographs of everyone she loved. The funeral was attended by over 5,000 people, not just family and foundation staff, but people whose lives she'd touched, families reunited through the foundation, children who'd spent Sundays learning to cook in her kitchen, caseworkers she'd trained, politicians she'd influenced, and countless others who had been changed by her story. Alexander gave the eulogy. He stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and for a moment couldn't speak. Then he found his voice. My mother spent 40 years searching for me. When she found me, I was cruel to her. I judged her. I mocked her on national television. I represented everything wrong with a society that values money over people, success over compassion, individual achievement over collective care. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. But she didn't give up on me. Just like she hadn't given up searching for 40 years, she didn't give up on teaching me how to be human again, how to love, how to care, how to see people not as statistics or problems, but as people. He looked at the casket, covered in white roses that Elena had always loved. She used to say, real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in smiles. And she was right. She died with almost nothing in her bank account because she gave everything away. But she was the richest person I've ever known because she was loved by thousands. His voice broke. She was my mother for only 20 years out of 63 years of my life. But those 20 years defined me more than the 43 before them. She taught me that it's never too late to change, never too late to choose love over hate, never too late to build a family, never too late to matter. He wiped his eyes. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation will continue. Every family we reunite, every child we keep with their fighting parent, every struggling mother we help instead of judge. That's my mother's legacy. That's how we honor her. Not by mourning what we lost, but by celebrating what she gave us. A second chance. All of us. She gave us all a second chance. The funeral ended, but the celebration began, because Elena had been very specific in her will. No sad gathering, no quiet reflection. She wanted music, dancing, food, laughter. She wanted her family, all 50-plus people she considered her children and grandchildren, to celebrate life, not mourn death. So they did. They gathered in her house one last time and filled it with the sounds she'd loved: children laughing, adults talking, music playing, food cooking. They told stories about her terrible jokes, her stubborn insistence on doing things herself, her habit of feeding everyone who walked through her door, her unconditional love that had saved so many. Alexander stood in her kitchen, looking at the recipe cards she'd written out in her careful handwriting, cards for arroz con gandules, tembleque, pastels, all the dishes she'd taught him to make. On the back of one card, he found a note. Mihijo, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be sad. We had 20 beautiful years, and that's more than I ever dreamed. Keep cooking these recipes. Keep feeding people. Keep loving people. That's all that matters. Te amo siempre. Mommy. He clutched the card to his chest and cried. Not sad tears, though. There was sadness, but tears of gratitude. For a mother who never stopped searching, for 20 years of Sunday dinners, for a love that survived 40 years of separation and continued even after death. Tommy found him there and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. She loved you so much. I know. I just wish I'd had more time. We all do. All. But Alexander, look around. Look at all these people. Every single one of them is here because of what you and Elena built together. She may have had only 20 years with you, but through you, she touched thousands of lives. That's not bad for a woman the world had thrown away. Alexander looked through the doorway at the living room full of family, at Marcus teaching the kids a card game, at Sarah arguing with Daniel about politics, at James telling an embarrassing story about Alexander to anyone who would listen, at all the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of their chosen family. She won, didn't she? Alexander said softly. The system tried to destroy us both. It took her son, stole 40 years, left her homeless and broken. But she won anyway, because she chose love. Every single day, she chose love. She did, Tommy agreed, and she taught the rest of us how to do the same. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation celebrated its 25th anniversary with a gala even bigger than the 15-year one. Alexander, now 58, had fully gray hair and the worn contentment of someone who had lived fully and well. He stood at the podium with Elena's photograph behind him, that picture from her 75th birthday, where she was laughing, surrounded by family. 25 years ago, my mother entered a reality show I created out of arrogance and cruelty. I thought I would prove that poor people were poor by choice. Instead, she proved that a mother's love transcends everything: time, distance, systems designed to destroy families, even the cruelty of her own son. The audience of 3,000 people listened raptly. In 25 years, the foundation she inspired has reunited over 150,000 families. We've prevented nearly 1 million families from being separated in the first place. We've changed laws in 47 states. We've trained over 100,000 caseworkers in family preservation. We've built an entirely new model for child welfare, one that starts with supporting families instead of destroying them. He paused, looking at Elena's picture. But the numbers aren't what she would want me to talk about. She'd want me to talk about the 7-year-old boy who gets to grow up with his mother because we provided emergency housing. About the teenager who doesn't have to age out of foster care alone because we funded kinship care. About the grandmother raising her grandchildren because we gave her legal and financial support. She'd want me to talk about the smiles. Images flashed on screens throughout the ballroom, reunited families, children laughing, mothers crying happy tears, fathers holding babies they fought to keep. My mother used to say, real wealth isn't measured in dollars but in smiles. She was right. By that measure, we're all billionaires here tonight. Standing ovation. But we're not done, not even close. There are still thousands of families separated by poverty, by mental illness, by systems that punish struggle instead of supporting it. There are still mothers searching for children taken from them. There are still children in foster care wondering why their parents didn't fight for them, never knowing that their parents fought as hard as they could but lost anyway. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. My mother searched for 40 years and never gave up. So neither will we. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation will keep fighting until every struggling parent gets support instead of judgment, until every child in crisis gets help keeping their family instead of losing it, until no mother has to search for 40 years to find her son, until no child has to wonder if they were worth fighting for. The applause was thunderous. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for supporting this mission. And thank you, Mommy, wherever you are. Thank you for never giving up. On me, on us, on love itself. After the gala ended, Alexander went to Elena's grave. He did this every week without fail, bringing fresh flowers and updates on the foundation. "Hey, Mommy," he said, sitting on the bench nearby. 25 years. Can you believe it? That reality show that was supposed to prove how superior I was ended up showing the whole world how broken I was." He laughed softly. "I still miss you every day, every Sunday when I cook your recipes and the kitchen doesn't smell quite right because I still can't get the sofrito perfect. Every time I see a mother and child and remember what we lost. Every time I see a family reunited and remember what we found." The summer breeze rustled the trees. "But you were right, you know, about everything. Love doesn't give up. Family isn't about blood, it's about choice. Real wealth is measured in smiles. All those things I thought were naive, turns out they were wisdom I was too stupid to recognize." He touched the headstone gently. "We're changing the world, Mommy. Slowly, but we're doing it. And every family that stays together, every mother who doesn't have to search, every child who doesn't have to wonder if they're worth fighting for, that's you. That's your legacy. You turned 40 years of pain into 25 years of healing. That's not bad for a homeless woman the system had thrown away." He stood to leave, then turned back. "Oh, and Mommy, I finally got the sofrito right last Sunday. Tommy's kids said it tasted just like yours. So wherever you are, I hope you're smiling, because real wealth is measured in smiles, and between you and me, we've made millions of them." He walked away, leaving the flowers, carrying his mother's love with him, and in his pocket, a worn recipe card with a note on the back. "Te amo siempre, always love. Before you go, be force. Tell us in the comments, what did you rate this story from 0 to 10? What's your city? And have you ever had a second chance that changed everything? Because every family deserves a second chance. Every person deserves to be loved. And it's never ever too late to change the world. Visit ElenaRodriguezFoundation.org to learn how you can help families stay together.